Some bikes weren't built to ride. They were built to fight back. These machines didn't just go fast. They bucked, wobbled, surged, and sometimes exploded without warning. From infamous widowmakers to beautiful death traps, we're counting down 10 dangerous motorcycles that tried to kill their riders. If you've ever twisted the throttle and felt fear instead of fun, you're not alone. And these bikes are exactly why. The Suzuki TL1000S was a V-twin sport bike with serious Ducati envy, and one fatal flaw. The TL1000S came with a rotary rear damper, an oddball suspension choice that turned into a death sentence at high speeds. When it overheated, which it often did, the rear end would bounce like a broken pogo stick. Riders described it as tank-slapping chaos on demand. Suzuki added a steering damper after multiple crashes, but by then, it had already earned its nickname, the Widowmaker. On paper, 996 cubic centimeters, 125 horsepower, pure V-twin glory. In real life, a violent rodeo ride in full leathers. It wasn't just dangerous, it was confidently dangerous. Like a dog that bites and then winks at you. The Yamaha RZ500 was basically a Grand Prix race bike with mirrors. It packed a snarling 500cc V4 two-stroke engine into a steel street frame. And that combo was just as wild as it sounds. The real danger? The power band. Below 6,000 RPM, it was sleepy, but hit 7,000 RPM and it punched like a rocket-powered mule. One twist too far, and you were airborne, often unintentionally. To make things worse, it had skinny tires, flexi suspension, and brakes that felt optional. You'd be flying into a corner at 100 miles per hour, and suddenly realize the bike was still deciding what to do next. This wasn't a beginner's bike. It was a test of nerve, skill, and reflexes. And if you failed, it hurt. The RZ500 didn't just ride like a GP bike, it crashed like one too. They called it the Widowmaker, and for good reason. The Kawasaki H2 Mach 4 crammed a savage 750cc two-stroke triple into a frame better suited for a bicycle. This thing made 74 horsepower and weighed just 382 pounds. That might sound fun, until you realized it had wooden brakes, no real suspension, and a chassis that wobbled like jelly on railroad tracks. Hit the throttle too hard and it didn't accelerate. It launched. The front wheel would rise, the frame would flex, and your life would flash before your eyes. It had insane power to weight for its time, but zero regard for handling. And once it hit the power band, you were either holding on for dear life or flying into the bushes. The H2 Mach 4 wasn't just fast, it was point, pray, and hope the road's straight fast. The Ducati 996R looked like pure Italian art. Under the fairings, a machine that was anything but forgiving. It came with a high-strung 998 cubic centimeter Testastretta Phi twin, producing 135 horsepower and a power band that punished hesitation. The throttle was sharp, the gearing was tall, and the clutch? Stiff enough to make your wrist beg for mercy in traffic. But the real danger came when things went wrong. Early models had electrical gremlins that could cut power mid-ride, sometimes mid-corner. Imagine carving through a canyon, and suddenly you're riding a brick. The 996R was also tuned for the track. Stiff suspension, race-spec ergonomics, and zero rider aids. One bad input, and it snapped like a pissed-off greyhound. Yes, it was fast. Yes, it was beautiful. But unless you rode it like Troy Bayliss on race day, the 9696R didn't care if you crashed. It just assumed you would. The Buell XB12R Firebolt was a rebellious beast. Built by Americans, powered by a Harley V-twin, and engineered like nothing else on the road. It had fuel in the frame, brakes mounted on the rim, and a wheelbase so short it felt like the front tire was in your lap. The engine made 103 horsepower, but what really got riders was the explosive torque and the jerky low-speed throttle that made parking lots feel like motocross tracks. Cornering? It was twitchy, braking, unconventional. If you tried to ride it like a Japanese sport bike, it would fight back, hard. And while it could corner like a scalpel, it needed precise body positioning and a rider who read the manual twice. Otherwise, it was a wrestling match. The XB12R didn't just require skill, it demanded loyalty. And if you disrespected it, it had no problem spitting you off. On the surface, the Honda RC30 was a dream machine, a hand-built V4 superbike with exotic engineering and race-winning pedigree. But beneath the prestige lay a bike that could bite hard if you weren't ready. With no rider aids, a stiff chassis, and super sharp steering, the RC30 was built for professional racers, not weekend warriors. The brakes were good for the time, but under hard use they'd fade fast, leaving you with a fast-moving missile and a prayer. Torque delivery was sudden, and mid-corner throttle changes could throw the balance off, especially if you weren't used to V4 engine dynamics. Riders who treated it like a fast Honda got humbled quickly. It may have worn the Honda badge, but this wasn't your average Civic on two wheels. The RC30 didn't tolerate mistakes. It just punished them, usually with a high side and a hospital visit. The KTM 990. Super Duke wasn't just a naked bike, it was a bare-knuckle brawler with handlebars. It had a 998 cubic centimeter V-twin, sharp geometry, and absolutely zero chill. Early models were infamous for their jerky throttle response, especially at low RPMs. You'd crack the throttle a little, and it would lurch forward like it was escaping a crime scene. Great for wheelies, terrifying in traffic. The suspension was stiff, the steering was lightning quick, and the engine braking could throw off even experienced riders mid-corner. KTM didn't bother with traction control in the early years either. You were the electronics package. It was raw, aggressive, and utterly unforgiving if you weren't dialed in. This wasn't a commuter. It was a street fighter that wanted to fight you. The Super Duke didn't want to be your friend. It wanted to see if you could survive the ride. The Bimota Vado was supposed to be a masterpiece, the world's first fuel-injected two-stroke 500cc street bike. Instead, it became one of the most dangerous production motorcycles ever sold. On paper, it was brilliant. 110 horsepower, a lightweight chassis, and that addictive two-stroke scream. But in reality, the fuel injection system was a total disaster. Throttle response was unpredictable. Sometimes it surged, sometimes it stalled, and sometimes it just cut out mid-corner, leaving riders sliding into ditches wondering what just happened. Handling? Great when it worked. But with engine mapping that changed moods like a caffeinated teenager, riding it was a gamble. Bimota eventually recalled most of them and converted later units to carburetors. But the damage was done. Buyers paid superbike money for a death trap. The Vado was beautiful, exotic, and terrifying. It didn't just try to kill its riders, it made them pay extra for the privilege. The Harley-Davidson V-Rod was Harley's wild child, a bold attempt to go fast, modern, and muscular. And while it looked like a drag strip demon, it also handled like one, which is to say, barely. It packed a 1,131 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled Revolution engine, co-developed with Porsche, pumping out serious power. But it came with a long wheelbase, awkward ergonomics, and minimal lean angle. Cornering felt like trying to U-turn a freight train, with buttered tires. Under hard braking, the weight shifted unpredictably, and more than a few riders discovered that the low seat and stretched bars made emergency maneuvers nearly impossible. Was it dangerous by design? Number. But throw a few overconfident riders into the mix, and the V-Rod's sketchy handling did the rest. The V-Rod was fast in a straight line, but turn too hard and it might turn on you. The MV Agusta F4000R wasn't just a motorcycle, it was a rolling sculpture. Designed by Massimo Tamburini, it looked like it belonged in a museum. But on the road, it was a barely tamed ballistic missile. It made 174 horsepower, had razor-sharp handling, and absolutely no rider aids. No traction control. No ABS. Just raw power delivered through a twitchy throttle and stiff suspension that punished any mistake. At low speeds, it was uncomfortable. At high speeds, it was brilliant. But only if you had track-level skill. Braking hard could unsettle the rear. Wet roads? Forget it. One wrong move and you'd be low-sided before you could blink. Many owners bought it for the looks and found themselves in way over their heads. The F4000R wasn't trying to kill you. It just assumed you knew how not to die. Some bikes thrill. These ones threatened. If you've survived one of these machines, or have your own near-death story on two wheels, drop it in the comments. And remember, ride fast. But respect the bike, because sometimes it's not the road that's out to get you. It's the machine.